Great. Thanks, George. I appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending today. Hope this will be interesting and helpful in many different ways. I will take questions, but if you can put them in a chat where Sheeta can kind of control them, and I will try to get them answered. I'd like to do more toward the end, but if something comes up while I'm talking, by all means do so. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. And more of the updates as far as where we are with cyber defense, cyber technology, threats for not just Windows people, but Apple. And so we'll just cover some things, some highlights. I'm not going to get into too much detail because this stuff would definitely bore you to death. But there are some things out there that I really want to clarify for folks because there's always been questions over the years between Apple and Windows, and a lot of people have left the Windows world and came to Apple, which has been awesome, but they still under the Windows mentality. So we'll go through a quick outline. Basically, I'll give you a little bit of an update of current events and a case study with what the hackers are doing today. It's pretty impressive. Antivirus, anti-spyware, and ransomware. Do we need these? Yes or no? On an Apple computer, and we'll talk about that. Our third-party disk maintenance utilities and other types of maintenance software absolutely needed on Apple, yes or no? And we'll talk really the truth about hard drives and SSD storage, backups. You know, if anyone knows when I talk, no matter when I finish my meeting, we're always talking about backups. I just can't express that enough. And then a couple years ago, I did pretty much tried out about 110 different VPNs, and we're still going to see if they're a good option to have. Are they good for everyday use, where and when, and we'll go from there. Right now for current events, it's, unless you've been under a rock somewhere, I guess everybody knows what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, China's involvement, and a lot of other countries. But yes, every day we have cyber threats, cyber attacks. If you want to scare yourself right at the morning coffee, just go to FireEye.com threat map, and you can watch all the missiles go back and forth like at the bottom of the screen there, as far as who's hacking what. And this goes on every day, all the time, and it does a 24-hour clock cycle, so it tells you how many attacks in each sector go on all day long. Resets at midnight and goes on to the next day. So this is nothing new, although with Russia's regards to Ukraine, they have stepped up their attacks. And a lot of that is, like you'll see in the first line there, they target communications, supply chain, distribution, really the energy sector. We do have some threats in our grid in the United States with Russia showing a presence in our grid. That's nothing new. China's been there for years, but it just is alarming because, you know, their presences are there. It does affect water, aviation, and healthcare at the top of the list, but by all means, there are a lot of other sectors that get hit daily just as well. Financial institutions, schools and universities, and so on. The crazy thing is, you know, not speaking for the UK or Australia, but in the United States, a lot of us have Comcast as a big provider, Verizon, AT&T, some have broadband. There's a lot of other, and even Google Fiber. There's a lot out in our country as far as providing our needs for internet backbone. Unfortunately, a lot of these companies still have gaping holes in their systems. For those of you in Florida, if you remember about a week or so ago, half the state, if not almost all the state, was without Comcast. We had no voice, no internet, and no TV. And that went for about 6 to 8 hours, depending upon where you were. And that was due to not a bug, but somebody putting a backhoe through a fiber optic line. Just one fiber optic line. Let me re-say that again. Just one fiber optic line took out Florida. So it tells you that you don't even have to be a hacker to hurt the grid. All you got to do is rent yourself a backhoe, find a strategic spot in the street, and put the backhoe through it, and you'll take down all kinds of communications just like that. Scary enough in itself. They are working on it, try to make things a little safer and better. It was a maintenance deal. This wasn't intentional. They do call before you dig. It's what we have here to make sure you don't put the backhoe through certain lines, but those things aren't always 100% accurate, and we did have an issue. It's been resolved for now. Modems even have issues. They're having firmware update issues. Some of the older modems that Comcast puts out because of shortages right now with equipment coming into the country. They do rehab older stuff, and some of them do have some vulnerabilities which they're working on trying to patch older equipment. And you guys remember during COVID, a lot of us had to stay home all over the world in a lot of different areas of the country. Well, believe it or not, there were over 79 billion visits to piracy websites between January and September of 2021. That was for people looking for free movies, free TV, because we had to pass the time, and this is what people did. A lot of times people watch them through their computer devices. In doing so, it also not only to generate money for the bad guy or the hackers that don't have rights to this content, but also you got a little parting gift, a little something with some of these movies went into a computer, i.e. Windows computers did get some viruses, some ransomware, and other nasty goodies. So that just gives you a hint. That was just on entertainment only, not kind of anything else that we do out there. And remember, cyber threats are not just a virus, a spyware, a ransomware bug. Identity theft and fraud worldwide to date is over $60 billion, and they get worse every day. And they really result on the three big things that I see and deal with each week. And a lot of them is unsolicited computer support. You didn't ask for it, it found you, and you got caught up in something. I'll explain that in a little bit. Responding to fake emails and phone messages and text. Those round out the top 5. Data breaches from companies, both internal and external. All these breaches are from a human element, not a computer. So it's not a computer program stealing the identities, it's a person. So that's another issue. Apple, as you notice, if you haven't seen your iPhone, your iPads, the Mac computers, we've been updating a lot of security updates. Apple by nature doesn't tell you what they do with their updates or what they patch. Sometimes they do because people pry, but at the end of the day, Apple's addressing a lot of things. But what I do like about Apple, different than everybody else, is they don't necessarily lead on to what's fixed or repaired or how they did it. It keeps the bad guy guessing whether or not something was fixed or resolved. So that is a nice thing from Apple. But we're not a Windows system. Windows still has a lot of gaping holes versus Apple. However, Apple now is battling other issues. If you notice 2 years ago, even with board approval from Apple, they, in order to have access to the iCloud, China's rules over there, they need to have access to the iCloud, which is over in China for their folks. They got the main hash keys and security access to get into the basically the iCloud in China if they need to, and Apple didn't really have a choice. So technically, China's in control, Chinese government's in control of that. If they really want to spy on their own people, they could, and we have no say-so. Our rights and freedoms in this country don't extend elsewhere, but just gives you an idea, just even our own Big Apple, which has so many plants and employs so many people over there, it does get harder and harder each day, plus they sell products there, so they have to comply. They're also battling stolen trade secrets. It's nothing new, it's been reported that, and I'll talk about that next slide, the M1 processor. So we'll talk about what's going on with that and where that's headed. And from the EU, if you just, latest news, the European Union is trying to force Apple to open up their OSs in the name of fairness for developers like PayPal and Venmo to access Apple's wallet and other things. So it's an ongoing battle. Apple, one thing I like about Steve Jobs when he was alive, when Flash, Adobe Flash was not permitted to run on the iPhone, it was because basically Flash player used to operate in the engine room, and most failures or crashes on a PC while surfing the web was due to Flash. So Apple did not want that in their browsers or access to the engine room. So way back when Steve Jobs predicted the death of Flash, and 10 years later, Flash was gone, even though it was already dead. So if you do get a warning on your Apple devices while you're surfing the web, or your Windows computer, if you have those as well, do not update your Flash player, because there isn't one and it doesn't exist anymore. So you can remove Flash from your computer safely. Do not update it because it's not real. Artificial intelligence. Well, you guys remember the old movie years ago, War Games, you know, game of chess or thermonuclear warfare? Well, that's kind of where we're getting into. There's a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning that does a lot of things. And it's very helpful in many ways, but it becomes a hindrance. Example, when you pull up to a gas station in a city or two from your normal place and you put the credit card in the machine or your debit card, it denies it, not because of insufficient funds, but because the AI feels that for safety reasons, it's not going to allow the transaction. So it's helpful in one respect that, well, no one's stealing your card. and the other respect is you're not getting gas at the pump at that point unless you have a different card or have cash. So that's just on the small side of things, but AI at a bigger level is running automation. It's running even threat analysis, especially between US, China, Russia, and North Korea, and a lot of other things. So there's a lot of analysis that's done through a computer. Not everybody can do this because there's so much of it out there.
Dennis, before you go to your next slide, we have quite a few requests for you to give the URL of the site where you say you can see the attacks.
Yep. Actually, if you just, well, I'll find it for you and I'll post it, but you can, it's the FireEye, just Google FireEye Threat Map, and you'll be able to see it, and it'll show it to you in real time.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
Yep, FireEye, and then Threat Map.
Okay.
It's actually pretty cool to see. It's kind of scary. There's a couple other ones out there. Norse and RSE does it as well. There's a few other cyber firms, but it's pretty impressive to see. It's kind of scary. You can actually see it. You'll see the attackers will be, I think, in yellow. The targets are in green, and then the orange ones will pop up something. You'll see when the screen's moving around that it might be a new bug, like a new ghost attack, a new rat, a new kind of bug. It's kind of cool to see them out there. So it's a little scary because it happens nonstop. And don't laugh. You'll see countries you never thought of even getting involved in something like Austria, and you'll see like 60 attacks hit it in a minute, and you just go, "Wow, what happened in Austria?" So it's a little scary.
All right, thank you.
Sure. As we move on, this is not a big deal. It's just kind of for reading, but for the Apple has fixed 2 zero-day vulnerabilities, and basically a zero-day vulnerability just means there's a hole in the security system that can allow a malicious code to run in between a couple different apps and things. But a threat already has to exist for it to occur. Most of the stuff I'm going to talk about here would be proof of concept. Yes, it can happen. Will it really happen? Probably not. But it's just Apple, along with other big companies, what they tend to do is they hire hacking firms that hack their systems and test everything, because you want to make your walls stronger, make your operating system more secure, and everyone's doing that. So hackers do report to Apple. And you've heard in the past, Apple doesn't pay a lot of money. And so some hackers get upset. So they just start blabbing it out there. Oh, Apple's going to have a virus and spyware and all these things. And realistically, they're all proof of concept. They could happen. Doesn't mean they will happen. And I'll explain when people say, well, no, I use Malwarebytes and I know there's spyware out there, so don't tell me. And how can you say that? I'll explain later about that, about what will affect an Apple and what won't affect an Apple computer. Right below the second paragraph talks about Gimmick. It's from a Chinese cyber attacker. Basically, Gimmick was a piece of malware. It's multi-platform driven, which means it's Windows, it's Android, it can be Apple. And what it did was basically it opens up your Google Drive and creates a session, installs a couple little tools, and it can take over maintaining your files and data and get access to it. So it's kind of scary, but I know Apple's patched that, so it's not affecting the Mac OS, but I know it has happened with Windows. So Apple, it's important to the security updates. Apple does always push out new protections. And for everybody that thinks you have to have Malwarebytes or Norton Antivirus or McAfee or Bitdefender, and we'll get into that later, keep in mind, Apple under the hood, they're quiet people, right? You don't see any fancy bright lights on the front of your Apple. In fact, the logo's not on there anymore. They don't say anything. It's kind of, I like idiot lights. There's no idiot lights on an Apple computer. But basically, behind the scenes, Apple has its own XProtect system that protects against spyware and viruses. It also has something called an MRT, which stands for Mysterious Removal Tool. That's how creative they are. It's an MRT system. And it's been recently updated as of 30 days ago, and I know there's more coming this way. So when they do show up for your iPad, your iPhones, whatever device you have from Apple, all your systems, please update them. It's important to do so. Apple's doing it for a reason, and they don't always tell you what they're fixing. Now, the problem Apple has right now is, in the past, when the M1 was coming out, there was a zero-day hole that could have affected the processor. It's actually at the base of the silicon creation itself. Both revisions, that's been repaired, and obviously we have newer processors, and M1 is going really well. And we are actually light years ahead of everybody else out there. It irritated Intel and Advanced Micro Device, AMD processors, because Apple has something that's going very good. Unfortunately, a computer virus didn't steal any technology from Apple. It was former Apple employees. There's a startup company called Revos, and they are system on a chip developers, and they were primary engineers for the M1 processors. So where am I going with this? Basically, these guys left Apple, and under even Apple's house, they used AirDrop to offload sensitive equipment between their devices. They used VPNs and a lot of other ways to get data out of there. So they stole basically high-end data from Apple, and now they're using it for themselves at a different corporation. So, and so now you're going to see another processor or processors or companies rival Apple as far as their processors are concerned. So again, it wasn't a computer threat this time, it was a human element. So this is one of the things you have to keep in mind, that this stuff will always happen. So VPN might keep you safe from someone looking at your bank account, but it also keeps me safe taking data out of somebody's company and sending it somewhere else. So I'll do a little case study. This happened recently. This happened last Monday. We have a high profile client, Fortune 500 person. I can't tell you who they are, what company. If I said the name, you'd be shocked. But they have all Apple products. They're very good people, very nice family. However, the guy looks at an email, and it says PayPal. That's all it says on it, and a whole bunch of gobbledygook. It looks like someone threw up on a piece of paper, but the only thing that was readable was the word PayPal. It was not addressed to him. It was just addressed to some weird name. It came from a girl named Donna at gmail.com, and then it gave him a bunch of threats. He needs to check. He made a big payment for a purchase and needs to verify it, and he has to call the number. Well, therein lies the rub. Of course, he calls the number. And yes, these are kind of very similar about how people go about and get caught every day. What I'm going to talk about is how the criminals have upstaged their game to actually fleece more money out of you, and in a different way of doing things. Because if they don't get their way, they leave you in a position where you actually don't have access to your computer anymore. So we'll run down a quick list of what happened. The person called the number, so-called PayPal agent. Of course, wins their trust over right away. So they get you to let them in the computer, and they do a dog and pony show on the screen. So it looks like you've got viruses and spyware and all this stuff going on. There's signs making noise, it won't go away. And then they win your trust by saying, we'll make it all better. Glad you called us, we'll take care of you. Now, mind you, he's running, it's only a month old, it's a 2021 MacBook Air, 20-month old, running the latest Monterey. So he's got all the bells and whistles up to date, ready to go, and now he's got somebody in his computer. Well, immediately, this guy allows him access to the keychain. So while he's doing a dog and pony show, he's changing the guy's actual computer login password. He goes and changes Apple ID password, and then he gets into File Vault and enables that. Explain why later. And then he sends them to BMO Bank and has them do a wire transfer to make sure that the money was still safe in his account, because now at this point, the guy is so rattled and distraught and been bounced around a computer screen for a half hour, doesn't know what to do with himself. So basically, they were going to do a dollar transfer to say, we're going to make sure it goes through. If it's fine, your money's safe. Well, he set it in for $1. Now, mind you, there's a lot of money in his account. Well, and he set it for $1 to hit the transfer button. He put up a screen that looked like a fake virus. So behind the scenes, the hacker pushes a button and $10,000 immediately got transferred for a wire transfer. And then the guy comes back and deals with the virus that, we got it taken care of. And he said, oh, by the way, the transfer went well, not to worry, your money's safe at BMO. Don't worry about that. So he's further now in the computer and transferring documents out of the computer behind the scenes to wherever the computer was, where the bad guy is. He now tells the victim to go to the Apple store, and he, of course, asked the victim, do you have an Apple store near you? And the guy says, of course, there's one. It's about 20 minutes away. Guy goes, great. You need to go get $3,000 in gift cards. So while this guy's frantic, and he says, stay on the phone with me. I'll be working on your computer, but as you go to the store, we'll give you more instructions as you go. I'm telling you, the guy's probably about 78 years old, nice, intelligent man, runs a big company, very distraught and disoriented at this point because of what's happening. and he's went down a rabbit hole, and he's in tunnel vision now. So his wife jumps in a car with him. They have a nice vehicle. They pull out of where they live. They start heading to the Apple store. The guy's on a phone, and she's like, where are we going? Why are we going to the Apple store? We need to do. And he starts telling her, I need to get gift cards. It's $3,000 to fix the computer. And then the agent, this is on CarPlay speaker in his car, the agent goes, who is that? He goes, that's my wife. He says, tell her to shut up and ignore her. So the wife really got irritated, because I would too. She said, no, and she hung up the phone call, and they went immediately to their bank. Of course, the husband and wife had a spat in the car because he was really caught up in the phone call, and she basically saved his butt at that point. Well, meanwhile, back at the ranch, at the house, the hacker's still in the computer, and he was in there for about 2 days. So he was taking stuff from behind the scenes and also calling them every hour on the hour to regain a connection. So we got involved because the wife ran into Carrie Kersey, which she's talked with you guys before, and Carrie and I work together. So she does the identity theft and fraud side. I do the computer side. So I came in and looked at the system, and even while I was there, the bad guy was still calling. So I said, don't answer the call, just ignore it, don't worry about it. But what happened was the guy, when I went to turn the computer on, because we told him to have it turned off, which he had done. Not only did he have it turned off, he literally took duct tape and went around the computer with it, so he wouldn't open it until I got there. It's kind of funny because it took us a while to get the duct tape off of it. So that was kind of funny. But nonetheless, he did his job. He turned off the computer and kept the hacker out. But the moment the lid came on, the computer restarted. Remote connection software from TeamViewer, AnyDesk, Log Me In, and Chrome Remote Desktop all engaged immediately. So that was going on behind the scenes, but I could not get access to it because his password, we'll say example was Buttercup, would not let him in the machine. So, and under the hint, it said service PayPal agent. So they just gave themselves their own hint, and they know what the password is, but I couldn't get into it. So I waited a few seconds, and the agent typed in, opened up the computer, and as soon as it did it, I was a chase between me and him to move to control the mouse. I actually accessed the Wi-Fi, turned it off. Now I'm in the computer. So now at this point, I got to change the password so that I at least got into the machine at that point. Well, with this going on, there's a long process. Luckily enough, because the computer is new, his Apple ID had been up to date. He had a recovery email address, which we used to actually go in and authenticate. The problem was it took an hour or two to do this, to get his password redone and get access to the iCloud and everything. The problem was he had older devices on there. So when it said, give me your 4-digit PIN code to an old iPhone 4, well, he doesn't have that anymore, and it was years old. So that was a problem because I had to get that stuff removed off the account first so I can get his current stuff to pick up the security codes when they send the 2-factor information out. So long story short, getting all that done, it worked. And then we got him started in the process of, all the credit freezes, credit reports, resetting all his passwords, and then increased procedures at different banks, entities he's done business with. So he's got a long road ahead of him with Carrie. As far as it worked for me, I did get all those remote access softwares out of the computer. We turned off Apple's file vault encryption. The reason why he encrypted the data, what we're seeing the hackers are doing now, they figure even if you get back into your computer or put it into target disk mode, where I plug it into another computer to pull the data out of it, it's asking for a password, which the hacker was already changed. I would never be able to decrypt it to get to the information. So they are really going a lot of different ways and deeper to control your computer and to keep you with them to follow their demands. So in a way, it's like ransomware, but just without the program, just done with a live person who's actually in the computer. So beware of emails, text messages, phone calls, and giving claim there's an issue that immediately needs to be addressed. No such thing. Apple's not going to call you. Microsoft's not going to call you. Google's never going to call you. These entities will not call you. Unless you're working through a case with an agent you've already been dealing with for a situation where it's a broken computer or getting a screen fixed or something. Apple and these companies, they have a normal way of communicating. They just don't call you out of the blue, and they're not going to send you emails. So anytime something is a sense of urgency, a consequence, and a monetary value to fix, just throw them in the garbage. They're not real. Eventually, if it was legit, it'll catch up with you. Otherwise, it's all garbage. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't know why people fall down this rabbit hole, but Anytime it looks like a fake Amazon purchase, an eBay purchase, a PayPal purchase, whether it says you bought a computer and it was shipped to somebody else's house across the planet, when you're disputing it with hopefully the entity or the correct entity, they will never need access to your computer to fix the problem. If somebody stole your credit card from American Express and went on a spending spree, you call American Express from the number on the back of your card or from the website officially, talk to someone there. They actually will abate the charges and go through it. They never ask for permission to your computer to come in to fix it. So if they're trying to get into your computer, obviously they're a hacker and not the real people. So do not let anybody in your computer ever. Unless it's me, of course, if you need help, I'll be there to do it for you. Otherwise, don't let bad guys in. They also do not need access to your bank accounts. If they ask you for that, no, they do not need that password to your password vaults, like 1Password, LastPass. They really try to get this information. And really, when they have you caught in that distraught mode, you're going to give this information up because you think you're doing the right thing. Unfortunately, it goes against you. So please do not do that. Also, if anyone here has ever tried to call Google because they're mad at their Gmail account, Google does not have an 800 published number that any of us can use. I work with law enforcement here in the court system, and I work several criminal cases, and I am power of attorney for several that the only way to communicate with Google is through snail mail. They do not have a phone number you can call. So if you did say you talked to Google, it wasn't Google, and if a credit card was involved, you need to get your credit card fixed, get a new one. And so I will tell you at this point, my new moniker is going to be security is a myth, because it's not always what you think it is.
I have a quick question for you, Dennis.
Absolutely.
Someone is on Big Sur and they're asking, would it be safer if they update it to Monterey? Would there be fewer vulnerabilities?
Well, you know, one thing nice about Apple is they do keep the last 3-4 operating systems completely up to date, especially with security. And they may go back even further than that as well. And Windows is kind of the same way. Most of these corporations are about the last 3-4 years, and some will go older. I don't generally want to just say, without talking to the person, seeing their machine, to say a blanket yes. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We get down to hard drives and things. But realistically, a short answer would be no for now, because if you have limited RAM memory, a smaller hard drive, it's an older computer, and if it can take the newer operating system, sometimes I say steer clear, because performance hit you'll take will just not be worth it. But if you have Big Sur and Monterey, even High Sierra, they've gone back on some of the security updates. So I do say that I think should be okay. I wouldn't advise it for right now.
All right, so they should just update to that latest OSs as far as they can.
Yeah, when you get to system preferences and you do the software update, you'll see if Monterey is available. Of course, they'd like you to upgrade to it, but below it, it will say updates. It's little blue print. If you click on that, it'll open up all the extra updates. Sometimes you'll see one for Safari. You'll see one for security updates or printers. So go ahead and do the updates. Don't necessarily have to do the upgrade, because the upgrade is a lot more involvement, especially for older machines.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the big question, and I'm sure those watching from afar besides the United States, antivirus and anti-spyware. So what's my quick answer? Do we really need these things? The answer is no, not recommended. And I'll tell you why. I'll cut it short. Apple has not officially stated, and I've been working with Apple for 35 years. They have their own stuff built in. And I think people like, we're all touchy-feely. We want to have control of things, right? If I could put 10 locks on the back of my house door, I feel good I have 10 locks back there, a security system, because I did it. But if it's already built in when I bought the house, for some reason, we're just not trusting that Apple has something in place. Now, I'm not saying that these programs don't have merit. They do. It depends on the instant situation and where it's going. But realistically, Apple is a proactive company. They have a very good ecosystem. We have very low maintenance. So for me, if the XProtect is working, the MRTs are working, the removal tools, and they're updating their stuff all the time, then we're doing pretty good. I can tell you I do this every day. I deal with people's turmoil every day. I've not seen a virus, a spyware issue, or ransomware attack on a Mac. Now, the ones that I have seen, all I can tell you is Parallels was involved, or Fusion, which is an emulator to run Windows on a Mac. And what happened was they allowed their local documents folder to be accessed through Windows. And when the ransomware did hit the Windows side, it caught the documents folder. However, it wasn't that big of a deal because the folks run Apples for their business. They run multiple backups with Time Machine. I literally just threw the, when I just quit Parallels, through the image in the trash, went to an hour before, put it back in, and they picked up right where they left off and didn't lose anything except an hour's worth of work and the time it took them to transfer the whole data file over and open it up. So I don't think we should go out and put these things in because, yes, Russia is attacking and China's attacking. Well, they've been doing that every day. They're really not looking to take us small people out. They're trying to take out the big stuff that's really a threat. Now, if they catch us along the way, it's collateral damage. But unfortunately, Apple's very proactive and they're doing their job. Can Malwarebytes be ahead of them and other people? No. The threat has to be determined and analyzed first before something can be offered as a fix and then installed to update and keep you from getting it. Now, bugs, the reason why people have antivirus, anti-spyware, especially in the Windows world, because the internet's out there and the bugs are always a-flowing. Even old bugs are still can be brought back to life. And so really, antivirus and anti-spyware only protect less than 10% of the known threats. So 90% of everything out there is going to crush us. So 10% of the known threats. So even the best stuff out there doesn't offer a whole lot of protection. I know we don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. We deal with this every day. I get to work with former NSA guys, National Security Administration folks. There's three big companies in Naples, Florida, and Fort Myers and Cape Coral that actually do battle with the Russians every day from our backyard. They have military contracts here in our country to assess data, and I get to see some of these things. That's pretty freaking cool and scary, and it's way above my pay grade or understanding. But I can tell you that the stuff we have, it's all we have. If it works, great. It just gets common stuff. But if anything really was major come out there, we're all going to get it at once before there could be a fix. So, but the good news is there are a lot of people out there, the white hat hackers, doing their job to find the vulnerabilities to allow people like Microsoft, Google, and Apple, the big ones, to patch their systems so that our stuff is safe. And that's a good thing. So being with the Mac product, by nature, most people, their stuff just works. Your iPhones work every day reliably. Your iPads do. You know, our computers. I run 20 machines, so I have 20 different computers for Apple running through the labs and for mobile use and everything. And I got to tell you, I rarely have issues, both if it's hardware related, not due to a virus, a bug, or anything like that. So I would just say no for now. A lot of these things are proof of concept, just because magazine or Ars Technica might say, hey, the new Robin Sparrow bug is out there. It's going to come get us, or Silver Sparrow. Proof of concept doesn't mean it actually affects our things. So the problem is, though, people play in dark places. So that's where people get into trouble. So if you surf the web and do things you ain't supposed to, or download bootleg materials like music, movies, which are big, games, software, because nobody wants to pay for Adobe products, then yes, you can get the stuff on your computer, but usually you get something else along with it. So don't install that stuff on your system. Almost 99% of the stuff that affects a Windows computer, or even some Macs, have because someone's put something illegal on the machine. So that I've seen. I don't count that as a virus or bug. It's because it didn't get there on its own. It got there because they put it in themselves and it wasn't the right stuff. So as long as you're buying from the Apple store or the Mac App Store or the iTunes or the iPod or whatever stores are out there, because Apple's got a slew of them, as long as you're buying from them, you should be safe. Doesn't mean something can't slip through, but it should be checked and balanced enough that it'd be good. And there are other reputable companies that you can purchase apps outside the store, and those companies actually have a name for themselves. But if you feel the need where you have to have antivirus or anti-spyware, just remember it can slow normal processes down on the computer. It can create some issues. But if you do it, make sure it's always up to date and use a paid version. Do not use the free ones because they're limited. A lot of folks, I know that Mac user groups talk about Malwarebytes, and I think you guys had somebody on there who was part of that. Malwarebytes is one of my favorite programs, and people are like, what? You know, so you're saying no to antivirus. Yes, on Windows computers, Malwarebytes is the cat's meow. It works. It's freaking awesome. It gets me out a lot of crap with people's Windows machines. I got to do both environments because a lot of clients have both Mac and Windows, but I don't really see the use of it, the need for it on the Mac, so it's not really done anything. But on the Windows computer, it's the bomb. Now, with that said, a lot of folks download it to try it. It's a free version. Even on Windows, it's good for 14 days, and then you got to pay for it. So please, if you want to use it, pay for it, because then you get all the features, and that way it works in real time. If you don't pay for it, it sits there until you push the button and tell it to scan. So otherwise, it might be installed, but it won't be running until you pay for it. Keep that in mind. Again, some colleges and universities may require students that are attending, especially coming back in the fall. You have a lot of new freshmen coming in. Sometimes a lot of these places require antivirus and anti-spyware on the computers, although most universities give Apple a pass because it's already built in, but some will require it, and Sophos for Mac works great, or Viper Advanced Security. So if you need it, they work, but it's just, again, one more thing to help slow the system down, another program that's always running. And again, if the threats aren't really there that we can see that Apple hasn't already addressed, then what are we going to war with? Because we don't even know what we're going to see. And if a new bug hits, it doesn't mean these programs will protect you at all until they actually have the definitions uploaded and ready to fight it for you. So in the meantime, it's just kind of like a cat and mouse game. And they don't protect against phishing emails, the text messages, and the phone calls. So unless you wander in the bad areas of the web, like I said before, or you like to download, illegal movies and software and whatever, then you should consider third-party protection. Otherwise, it is not needed.
Quick question, Dennis.
Go for it.
Setup app bypasses the App Store. Does that create problems?
Well, it can. Things that bypass the App Store, Apple, everybody gets mad at Apple because they're a closed ecosystem, but for good reason, because they're selling a high-end product. Their stuff's not cheap. It has to work. But a lot of people now want to find a way around Apple's pay system. They want to be able to do upgrades outside the store or even buy apps outside. It's a touchy subject. I would say reputable companies, probably not a problem, but unfortunately, it's like now you try to find a weather app on your phone. There's only 40 million of them. Which one's the good one, right? And they all make claims, but a lot of them are a copy of each other. So yes, that can pose a potential threat, but will antivirus, anti-spyware, other things actually detect that kind of stuff? If there's a problem, maybe, maybe not. But Apple is also probably going to make sure that when their system gets opened up a little bit more, and we'll talk about it later, when the EU is going to try to force Apple to open their system a little bit, I'm sure that their protection systems in place are probably going to get more robust. So it's a little scary.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
Disk management and computer tools, there's a lot of them out there. I mean, a lot. I mean, years ago, we used Norton disk tools when, early Macs, way back when, and, there's Tech Tool Pro, Disk Warrior, there's Clean My Mac. I mean, there's duplicate finders, Disk Warrior, there's Clean Sweep, App Zapper. There's a whole bunch out there. When do we need this stuff? Do I need it every day? Is this something, I should run once in a while? So my quick answer is always no, for good reasons, but then maybe unless there's a real problem. So I always tell people, let me explain. So Apple, like I said, it's a good ecosystem. It's safe, it's secure, it works, it's low maintenance for the most part. Doesn't mean it's not without issues. But with that said, we can benefit from third-party tools. So I would say if you're having disk problems, something's not right, start with Apple's disk utility first. Do a quick first aid, see if anything pops up. If everything looks green, doesn't mean it's hunky-dory, just means so far that looks okay and you can do some other things. Oftentimes you can just restart the computer and fix things. But there are legit apps out there that can help with things like Onyx. It's a free app, and they update every year with the OSs. And Onyx has a multitude of tools. Like sometimes you throw something in a trash and it just won't empty for love or money, and no matter what you do. And sometimes I've done terminal commands I couldn't empty the trash, but yet I was able to download Onyx and say force empty trash, and it did. So it's kind of a cool program for those weird instances. Especially if the file's corrupt. I mean, you might need something to help force it, and that did a great job. Daisy Disk is great. It gives you a full inventory of the computer. It tells you where all the space is taken up. So if you have a large photo library, large music library, it tells you that. But oftentimes people will have Time Machine in place, and when the hard drive fails, or you get that notice that says your Time Machine has it backed up at 145 days, the computer is still recording, basically a ghost file behind the scenes. So when the hard drive reconnects or a new one comes in, it will try to bring back all the changes that were made for that past time. But that also takes up space on the hard drive. So when people go, oh, what does other mean? And why is it 20 gigs in size? I have no idea what that means. Well, a lot of times if you just say, hey, I don't use Time Machine, turn it off until you get your hard drive fixed, or actually release the space back to the computer. And then when you plug in your Time Machine with a new disk and get it formatted and ready to go, then you can start from scratch from there. But this tools will help you find things like that, or you can't figure out why. Sometimes people load Dropbox, don't realize that they actually started using it, and then every now and then data ends up in there. So now that local folder gets full, and they don't understand their documents folder has nothing in it, but everything in Dropbox is still showing there's a lot of files. Daisy Disk will help narrow it down and help you find things you didn't even know you had. So it's actually pretty cool. App Cleaner's nice. You might have an old copy of Adobe Photoshop from an older version and didn't get everything out. That app can zap actually all the extra features that came in with that app safely and securely, and it does a nice job. So that does work. Do you need it all the time? Probably not. A lot of programs have uninstallers. Some you just drag to the trash. It's not a big deal, but there are good things that do work. Now, there are bad ones out there you gotta stay clear of. Everywhere you surf, you'll see MacKeeper pop up. That's unsolicited support. It gets in your computer and then gives you false positives, and then eventually you're calling a company or doing a chat session, and you're handing over a credit card, so you pay for a repair that doesn't even need to happen. So I call that unsolicited support through an app, but it makes claims, and you'll see it pop up on your side window a lot of different sites. Clean My Mac, I don't like that program either, because it does things can actually harm the system. So I think when it says the clean stuff, most people say, hey, I just want to wash my computer, make sure it's nice and clean on the inside, and I'm going to push all the buttons I can. And when they do that, they actually can do more harm than good. Some programs like duplicate finders are great when you go, well, gee, I got a big music library, and when we do here, if you got 50,000 tracks, 100,000 tracks, not unheard of, you're obviously going to run into duplicates, especially on compilation albums that, you might get the same song 10 times. Well, that's okay if it finds a couple duplicates and you can delete them and just stick with the one and trim up the system and save space. However, it's a hindrance when you come to photos, because what happens sometimes is if you don't pay attention, it might say, hey, we found 30 gigs of duplicates. You might say, go ahead and delete them. You have the option to review them first. And somebody says, well, I'm not going to review 50,000 photos. I'm just going to go with what the computer program recommendation is. The problem is you may have deleted the master copy, the full size image or raw image, and saved the thumbnail, which pops up in your Photos app or your iPhoto when you're looking at it, or even Lightroom. So you don't want to just save the thumbnail. You want to save the raw photos. You want to make sure you don't throw the good, healthy stuff away. Unfortunately, a lot of folks came over from the Windows world and were hell-bent on having to make sure everything is clean and trim and having to fix something every day. This is not Windows, this is a Mac, so you don't have to do that. And defragmenting the drive, we don't do that anymore. So if you think about, I had people ask me about defragmenting. No, that was when hard drives are small, the sizes they have and the way data is stored nowadays, it's not needed. But really it comes down to simple things. I always ask people, what kind of problem are you having? Just like when Sheeta asked me about should she update to the next operating system. Well, my questions are just like that. Can a simple restart resolve the issue? Is your internet working? I just was at the library the other day where you guys used to meet, and they had an issue with the internet went out. They didn't know it. Their emails kept asking for a password. Then they went change the password. They can't figure out why they can't log in. The whole time they had no internet. So I said, wait, the internet comes back on and go back and everything will work fine. It did. So you got to make sure the issues, not necessarily just a computer, outside things affect that, especially not having a working internet connection. Did you give installed apps permissions to run? Okay, well, that's funny because nowadays you go to the old days, you buy an HP printer, you put the disk in, it installed, you used it, life was great. and everything was good. Nowadays, you install the disk, and now it wants to know, can I have permission to access your photos folder? If you're scanning, can I access your documents, your desktop? Can it, is allowed to print? I mean, you have to give it all these permissions now. Apple's trying to make sure that nothing mysterious runs in the system and that we are conscious of what we do, but it's also a pain in the ass. So it's just one of those things. You may have to get Zoom to work. Why isn't my mic working? Well, you got to give permission to access the microphone or screen recording. These are things you have to do. How old is your computer? The biggest one I see from a lot of the MUG members, because one thing nice about Apple equipment, it does last a long time. Most of us have our machines 5 to 7 years. The one I'm talking to you on right now, don't laugh. I'm at my desk in the office because it's an old workhorse. It's a 2013 late 27-inch iMac. It's working pretty good so far. I'm still talking to you guys. It hasn't quit yet. But I can't put Monterey on this one. Now, other machines have it. This one doesn't. People say, well, why don't you put one of those SSD drives in it or make it run faster? It's a 2013 unit. I mean, it's already past its working time. I should retire this thing. So don't spend money on old systems by putting a better hard drive in it. Yes, the SSD would be nice. The problem with it is, besides the hassle and the cost, is the fact that, well, it only has a limited amount of memory I can add to it and can't exceed that. The hard drive, when it goes to a certain point, the processor, the screen, the video card, I mean, everything is limited. So eventually it's going to fail. So now I have a new hard drive and an old system. And when it goes, now what am I going to do? It's just not worth putting the money into old systems. And honestly, when you buy a new Apple computer, and I will tell you this to everybody, if you've noticed at Apple's offerings, they got some pretty cool stuff out there, but they're getting stingy with the SSD storage. They start about 512 gigabytes. Even the cheapest iMacs had a terabyte. So now you really have to upsize your stuff. And the way things are made now from Apple, you have to max out what you can afford for RAM memory. I know that it works the unified memory now on the new systems, and hard drive size. So if you had a terabyte before, think about 2, because they're going to last another 5 to 7 years. But you need to have the room, because we can now no longer go back into these devices and add more memory, whether it's unified memory, RAM, or storage. We're not going to be able to do it. It's all soldered into the board. So before you make your purchase, make sure you get as much as you can get or afford, because it's going to be important, because it will last you probably another 5 to 7 years. Other things, is your problem chronic or is it temporary? I mean, sometimes it's just something happened once, no big deal. Sometimes the computer restart, believe it or not, fixes everything. And I tell people nowadays, a simple schedule. Well, I leave my computers run 24/7. They don't turn off except once a week. We restart the systems and they've been fine. A lot of times people who use laptops, they just open and close the lid constantly, and it kind of goes to sleep, wakes up, but it's not a full restart. So every once in a while, shut down and restart. It'll actually be better. Because what happens is, it's called a memory leak, and like Firefox is known for this. It's a great web browser, but sometimes if it takes 20 megabytes to open and then it closes, it doesn't put 20 megabytes back in the system for other apps to use it. And then it opens again, it takes another 20. So now it's holding 40. So then if you open and close your browser 10 times in a day, times that by 20, that's how much memory is getting held hostage. And eventually you'll get a little warning from Apple. It says low on application memory, and people freak out, can't figure out why. Just restart the computer, it resolves the problem. So simple things like that. When people call me and say, I've restarted, I've done this, this, and this, then it gives me enough room and tools and knowledge to move forward with fixing and resolving an issue, because you've already done the basics. Plus, it saves a lot of time. Half the time, you can fix it yourself, especially with the Apple. Now, one of the things I ask people is, did your computer get worse, or did you lose data after running a repair tool? Because that happens too. Some people say, well, I'm going to run Disk Warrior. I'm going to rebuild my system. Well, that's a problem, because if it didn't finish or the drive is already failing, when it starts up, it actually may be worse than it was in the first place. One of the things is, if your computer's having some issues, you can do the recovery start from Apple and do a disk utility check there at that level. And then if need be, especially after an update or upgrade, sometimes the computer acts wonky, you can actually reinstall the operating system from Apple right there. And that usually resolves most problems. Now, if it doesn't, then most likely it's going to be a storage issue, whether it's a hard disk drive or an SSD drive starting to have some issues itself. Could be the logic board as well, but usually that's where the problems start to occur. Now, but I will tell people this is not a Windows computer, so don't treat it like one. But for the most part, your Apples will run great, but they do have hiccups from time to time, and we've all had those happen. Now, one of the big things we talk about now is what kind of storage do you have? I mean, most of the new computers come with these solid state drives. The old rotational platter drives are kind of, being phased out, although cheaper, and they're pretty big in size now. They're just being phased out. The differences between the two: conventional hard drives use electromagnetism to read and write on the platters, and SSD drives use a complex mathematical algorithm to place data. Basically, like a farmer's got his tools and he's got his crops, and he's got to figure out how many places he can plant his seeds and how many times he can replant and grow on that particular crop. And somebody's going to keep track of all that. Eventually, it will stop reading and writing to certain areas of the crop because it's all wore out, and that can happen. Now, SSD drives are like CDs, are supposed to last forever kind of thing, but they're electronic and they're a chip. And then when they get zapped or short out or crack from heat, which they have happened, then there's no getting data back. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Not to mention, as of 2016, the smart status checking of your SSD, Apple doesn't allow that anymore. Not sure why, but that's Apple's prerogative. So what does that mean? So if you install a disk tool because you want one and you don't like what Dennis says, I'm actually okay with that. You do what makes you guys happy. I'm always there to help. But make sure you apply your updates often, because it's important. Because sometimes after an update or upgrade from Apple, like if you go and rate from, say you have Disk Warrior or some other tool on your system, and you like to run it to keep your, like a Mac Cleaner example, and all of a sudden you went from Big Sur to Monterey. Well, now if you don't update those two tools, you might get false positives being reported from these programs, and even antivirus, anti-spyware. So they might quarantine healthy code if it's one of those antivirus, anti-spyware programs, or you might get an error where these programs will try to clean something and can't, or fix something and can't because it doesn't understand the operating system it changed. So make sure that those tools get updated. It's important. They may not, all these things, including Apple's, may not resolve the problem. So it could be a hardware failure or corruption in the operating system itself. So like I said, I was a firefighter for 20 years, and for vehicle rescues, we used to have the jaws of life. You guys have all seen those things that open up cars and tear them apart. My chief would always say, try before you pry, because if the door is unlocked, all you gotta do is pull the handle and open it up and get the person out, versus ripping a door and roof off it when the door is unlocked the whole time. So try to do the basics first before we get advanced. And that's what I try to tell most people. And I know it's hard when you're frustrated when something isn't working, but you know what? You guys are all part of this great MUG group organization. There's a lot of people here, a lot of talent, a lot of great minds, and a lot of you have great knowledge. Reach out and ask each other. I mean, you can always get a hold of me. I mean, my stuff will be up there. You can call me, you can text me, ask me questions. I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I get called all the time. I'd rather hear from you guys than some of the clients I actually have. So I really want to make sure you're taken care of. I don't always have all the answers, but I will find you the right answer, or find you the right person who can get you to that next level. So that's what we try to do. We've been doing this a long time. But since we talked about hard drives and failures and things, I will tell you, actually down the left corner there, you see the explosion. It's supposed to be a little broken computer chip, but I guess it didn't show up this time. How about that? See, my first issue. Okay. Mm-hmm. So with that said, backups, they are absolutely important. So data recovery off, if you look in the top right corner, you see the old inside a conventional rotational platter hard drive. And what's nice about that is if the needle breaks, I take those records right out of the record player, put them into a different one, and get your data back. Now, unless it's a complete head crash where the whole thing got gouged and scraped, there's still, might only be on one side, but there's other platters in different levels that I can still pull data from. So that's kind of a good thing if you didn't have a backup. SSDs, well, it's kind of like one big computer chip. And what happens is if it gets zapped, well, you're not resurrecting it. If it gets cracked because of heat or there's a failure, a lot of times, like even the little memory sticks, little jump drives, well, nobody puts them in the computer level. They always go in on an angle. When they go on an angle, eventually they snap off and you think, oh, I broke my thing. But if that's the only place you had your data, it's hard to get them back if you crack and separate the chipboard. So if it's just a solder point, sometimes I can resolder them back and get your data back. If not, it's gone for good unless you have a copy somewhere else. And SSDs nowadays are going to create a big problem for forensics because, as you know, when you have an iPhone or an iPad and or even an older Mac that you want to turn into Apple for credit and you give store, get cash or value, it's a simple reset, right? It's great. So you just erase it and send it back in, which is awesome. Well, the resetting of with these things are awesome. The sad part is, so is recovery. You can't get it. So it went back to Apple. You can be sure your data won't be recovered. But somebody like me who does this for a living, if you did it accidentally, I cannot get your data back either. So unless you got a backup, and you're going to hear that word come out of my mouth a million times, unless you have a backup, you're SOL. And if File Vault was encrypted when your SSD drive failed, you're never going to get your data back, period. So also keep in mind, this is one of those things that people haven't figured out because Apple's offerings of storage is so small, like the 256 gig or 512 storage sizes. I say get the biggest you can get because what happens is a lot of people like to have that extra protection. File Vault's a cool program. It encrypts your drive. The problem is to decrypt it, you have to have space. A lot of people start to fill their drives up and there's no room to decrypt it. So if we get to that instance, it gets to be a big problem trying to get your data out because especially if the drive is full, even through target disk mode, if I have no room to expand it, I can't get the stuff out of the drive. It gets to be a problem. So the answer to all this stuff is first stay calm because Dennis did scare you a little bit, but backup, backup, backup. You guys talk about this stuff all the time. I'm not the first person to tell you this. I know you guys eat, sleep, and drink backups. So have multiples. Time Machine allows 2 separate backups, which I think is great. You guys have heard of Super Duper and Carbon Copy Cloner. Use them for 1 or 2 more. Then a cloud-based backup, via iDrive or Backblaze. They both work great, but everything needs to be monitored. So don't assume just because you plugged it in, it's great. I have a lot of people who get their Macs, they go and buy Western Digital Drive, they plug it into the side of the machine, and they assume that Time Machine is running. Well, if you didn't follow the prompts, they go to set it up and enable Time Machine, it's there but not doing anything. So a lot of false senses of security because people just by assuming plugging it in, it did what it had to do. It's not how that works. But be sure that you monitor all your backups, make sure they work. You can even check them once in a while through disk utility, make sure they're healthy. If one starts acting goofy, if you got delay in your startup, when you have a bunch of drives attached, pull a couple off and start it up without it, see how the computer acts. If it does well, then reload each hard drive individually. Sometimes you can find a bad drive, as simple as that. But cloud backups need a little more attention, especially after upgrades and updates, so that way to make sure that they're up to date so they can back up to new stuff. But Backblaze works awesome. iDrive works awesome. I've been very happy with them. We've done recoveries with both, so I have no complaints. I don't like Carbonite as much, so I tell people to kind of steer clear of that family. Now, some people have good success with Carbonite. I'm just not 100% sold on it because they used to have, like Mosey did years ago, they had some data integrity checks. So when a file leaves your system and gets to the cloud, it's supposed to do an integrity check to make sure the data is equal and perfect. And sometimes it wasn't always thorough with that. So when you did when the time happened where you had to get your data back, you didn't, or there was damage. So let's see. All right. Moving right along to VPNs. So I'm sure a lot of you use a virtual private network, and it's kind of funny because they're a nice tool to use to keep your data safe, especially if you're in a foreign place. I know we were talking earlier before the meeting started. One of the MUG members has a friend that was in Morocco a lot. Morocco is one of the big places on the planet to have identity theft and fraud. There's a lot of hacking going on in Morocco, so I always say buy a burner phone, one from Walmart, and go over. Don't take any of your stuff with you because you're probably going to lose it when you get there. And that's no joke. But China is the same way. Russia is the same way. India for some part of that, and even North Korea. So the places we're probably not going to end up going, but some people in this group may visit or have family there. So keep in mind, VPNs are great. They're virtual private network. They will help encrypt your data from point to point. They do good. So especially if you have public Wi-Fi and you don't have access to a trusted network, then by all means use it. It also allows you to access content out. So example, if you want to access services like you want to watch Big Bang Theory, you know, it's something we watch here in the US, but maybe it not be broadcasted over, as we'll say example, in France for some reason. I can use a VPN, connect to a local VPN in the US, and then be able to watch my TV shows, so to speak. And a lot of guys do that from UK coming over here to watch a lot of BBC and different things, a certain programming that you can't get outside the country, because a lot of these entertainment companies have contracts and there's region rules as far as what can be shown in different areas. Give you an example, years ago when CDs and DVDs were the thing, they all had region codes on them, which meant if I had, we'll say Toy Story, you know, Pixar's Toy Story movie, and here in the US, it'd be region code 1 for US, but if I took it over to the UK, example, I'm not sure what your region code is, but we'll say it's region code 7. Well, if I put it in your DVD player will say, will allow you 1 or 2 time accesses to a different region to play this disc. Do you want to okay it? You say yes. But before that third time is done on most of these devices, you have to put your original region disc back in, which is a DVD from where you live, and it sets it permanently. You can no longer bypass that. So for security restrictions and content, they will not allow you to play DVDs outside the country because it's based on region codes. Well, it kind of gets the same way with, you know, Comcast and all these entertainment services and music. So there are some things, even though you might be using VPN, you may not get access to them, but they do allow you to access a lot of content outside your home base. Now, you can bypass restricted networks. So I guess some places, you know, you can't check your Facebook because, you know, God forbid somebody don't check your Facebook, but they can allow you to do that. And you can share files privately. Now, this is part of the good, but it's also part of the bad, because as I reported early on, you know, Apple lost a lot of their trade secrets with the M processors due to some VPNs and AirDrop. So sharing files privately, well, it kind of goes against you as well. So it's good for you. It's also good for the bad guy. So it goes both ways. But they also tell you not to, you know, send illegal files over things, but people do what they do. Now, you do have a right to privacy. So VPNs, you know, you want to make sure you're safe. And so if people give you a hard time, you should feel good about a VPN. But not all countries believe in that. I can tell you, yes, our country has National Security Administration. Yes, we have mainframe farm computers here. And basically every text, every email, and all goes through those servers, and, you know, how we do things. Now, it doesn't mean we're on anybody's watch list. It just says that, you know, Big Brother is always there. And if you're a good person, then it shouldn't matter at all. But if you're a bad person, then that's a whole different story. So that's why people like to play cloak and dagger and hide and do things they're not supposed to do. But a VPN will give you some right to privacy. China does not believe in that, or does Russia. So if you're over there and you try to use a VPN, be careful. You may end up in jail, because you think, well, if I'm VPN, how can they find me? You're still connected to somebody's ISP. They can read the signature and say, oh, that's an encrypted stream running somewhere. They, by law, have to report that to the government entity. Don't be surprised if some people in funny suits show up at your hotel room in Moscow and you're in shackles. So unfortunately, even though you think it's your right to use a VPN, you may not be allowed to whatever country you're visiting. So like anything, where you're going, make sure you know what the rules are before you play the game. So when in Rome, do as Romans do. It's what they say. They give you privacy, but, you know, besides being illegal, you'll have performance issues. So of course, if I'm trying to get back to US server and I'm over in, we'll say, France, that's a long way to go for data to get to a server somewhere, and we'll say Nebraska, that pops up, then stream the data back to me at my device in France. So you'll get slow speeds, and it goes two ways. Even if you have fast internet at your house or your business, your office, or even at the hotel, wherever you're staying, that's all well and good, but don't forget you're at the mercy of the ISP, internet service provider, and the speeds that they have on their trunk lines where they're at, not to mention the encryption takes time. For the most part, it works well for what we have to do, but sometimes you're going to see performance degradation, or you'll have login issues. They'll time out before they actually come back and let you in. So there can be issues with trying to use it or trying to send big files. So just the way that goes. Now, a VPN service might monitor your activity. I mentioned before with it comes to antivirus and anti-spyware, you should use the paid versions, right? Well, same thing with VPN. Pay for a service, do not use the free VPNs. There's always a trade-off. I tell people, look at Facebook. Where else can you put all your photos for free, right? The whole world can see them. But once they get uploaded to Facebook, that's their property, not yours, okay? So there's a trade-off. You kind of give them your stuff, but you get to stay there for free. So it's safety and security and convenience are two different things, and you can't have both. And well, you give a little bit of your soul when you sign into Facebook, and a lot more, and Instagram and Twitter and a few others. So that's a whole nother topic. But nonetheless, they can monitor your activity. And honestly, if you're in a country that where the ISPs have to support funny business or VPN transfers, then they may report it to the authorities, and then they actually may seek out where you're at and come after you. So even then, or they can decrypt, like in China, if they see something they don't like, they can decrypt it, look and monitor the traffic. So there are countries that really take their security seriously. Even if you're using it for banking or to watch a TV show here, it's not allowed over there, or they're going to watch and see what you're doing, because really they trust no one either.
Right.
Keep it in mind.
You have 5 minutes, Dennis.
Okay, so real quick, we're almost at the end. So other than that, it's hard for some business users to set up in their offices. You might have to have support from your IT staff to help you, and it may cost more, because not only do you pay for high-speed internet, now you're paying for VPN, and so there's always a cost factor. And like I said, it could slow down your speeds. It cannot guarantee 100% to make sure you're anonymous. Sometimes the DNS will, the server for VPN will fail. All of a sudden you instantly get decloaked, and now they know where you're at. So that can happen. Some have double VPNs where you run through 2 VPN servers to keep yourself a little safer. And some will actually just terminate the whole connection completely, where that way you don't get exposed, but it does happen. And unfortunately nowadays, with more security restrictions and safety and security in all our countries, it's not always possible to bypass all the restrictions. Long story short, there's a list of, like I said, we've looked at 110 of them or so. The 2 I like are at the bottom of the list. These aren't in any particular order, but it's Mulvad and TunnelBear. They are great. They offer a lot of features. You can look at the reviews. They're just 2 good companies. As far as how many servers they have, keeping you anonymous, dual VPNs. I mean, they do a lot of different things, and full disclosure of who their affiliates are around the world. So these are 2 great companies. I know people in my group, I know, use TunnelBear, and some use Mulvad, so very good to deal with. So here, I think we'll just do a quick takeaway. As far as recap is concerned, once it pops up, well, that's slow. Okay, so as far as the antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-ransomware, I just say it's not needed. But if you must use them, then use a paid version and keep up to date. And people ask what are recommendations. So if you need it for your Mac, Viper, Advanced Security, Malwarebytes, and so forth for Mac. Stay away from the McAfee, stay away from the Bitdefender, stay away from the Nortons. That's all crap. It really is. So stick with the ones that these are the guys that are actually tried and true, and actually are at the enterprise level as well. So they're a better game to play with. But again, less than 10% protection of the known threats out there. So just keep in mind, Apple's already doing their job with their internal built-in system, but this is what we have. Do not try to overfix your Mac. If you need disk utilities, if they're really needed, make sure, and then do the basic steps before you try to do open heart surgery on your computer. Hard drives and all storage will fail. It's not a matter of why, it's a matter of when, so do your backups. And yes, VPNs are good. They're not needed all the time, only when you're not around your trusted networks. If you're traveling outside your home country, and if it's not illegal to use, you can use them. But a lot of them, people use it for your banking and your financial transactions or checking accounts. Just so you know, you may not be allowed to even log in, even from your home country, your home city, into your local bank through VPN, or even outside the country, because they are changing some rules. They want to know exactly where you're at before you log in, so they know it's you and not a criminal. So it's getting a little bit harder. So we have things in place to keep us safe, but then they get restricted as well. You can do a lot of things over your cellular data, believe it or not, for sensitive stuff, because they're not really copying all the cell lines. So Cellular data does work well if you have cell signal. It doesn't necessarily work if you're traveling outside the country. And also one last caveat, VPNs may not give you 100% protection, so don't use the free ones. Paid is best, and then the recommendations, like I said before, are TunnelBear and Malvad. So I could take questions. If we run out of time, I apologize. I know it went longer than I should have, but I can take, you can always email me and I can call you, we can chat or whatever you want to do it. I'll make sure I'll take care of any of your needs. That's what I'm here for, so.
Okay, great. And that might be thank you. That might be the best way to do that because we are running out of time. I do want to say that for those of you who are asking questions about backup, please go to the NMUG YouTube channel and watch Joe Kissel's video on backups. Very good information, and we'll answer your questions. With that, Dennis, I want to thank you so much for your presentation. You have some great answers,